So, I just finished watching a film called Eraserhead by David Lynch, and it was actually a pretty, you know, albeit to say a pretty interesting experience for me. You know, if you don't know what Eraserhead's about, um, a man is living in his apartment, and he has a baby with a woman who's living with her parents, and this baby comes out mutated. Pretty much, it's just like a weird kind of reptile head with covered in bandages. It's about like this big, you know, and and kind of the struggles of having to take care of that baby. You see, I'm doing a little bit of an Eraserhead cosplay here. Anyway, what I enjoyed about this film is that oftentimes I'm trying to interpret the meaning or like the subtext of a film, but you try and do that as you're watching it with Eraser with this film, and you find very quickly that it's kind of, you give up very quickly. And, as a person that often, struggles with trying to find the meanings behind films, this trying to find the meaning behind this one seems so fruitless. Trying to interpret every single little bit of subtext seems so fruitless that it's almost like calming. It's like, okay, I'm just gonna let this flow. I'm just gonna let the meaning kind of flow. And I found that was actually a lot easier to actually watch the film when I did that. If I could theorize a sort of theme of the film, it's like the struggle of having to take care of something when you can barely already take care of yourself. Um, this I forget the main character's name. I'm terrible with names. I'm sorry, but Eraserhead, let's call him the main character. He lives alone in the apartment. He's on vacation, which basically means he's probably unemployed. Um, and now he has this baby and wife to take care of, and the wife tried to move in with him, take care of the baby with him, but the baby just cries all night. It's getting sick. It won't, eat the food that's trying to give it. And the wife just says like, "I'm out of here," almost immediately. And because it's like she can't even get a night's sleep, and nothing seems to be working. And it just seems so futile because what kind of life could this baby lead in the first place? Even if it did get better, it's like it's some sort of like mutant thing, and the entire time you're kind of just getting the vibe of maybe we should just get rid of this baby. It's probably for the best or for the better of it, but of course there's that struggle of like how you're gonna kill your own baby, kind of thing. Um, I think that struggle of temptation is very much also very core to the film because at the very beginning, there's this attractive woman that's living right across from him. He's in apartment 26, he's in apartment 27. And she kind of winks at him, flirts with him a bit, but he puts it off until about halfway through the film, or after the baby's been crying for a long time and it's getting sick, and everything he's trying to do, like the meager thing he tried to do, he puts a humidifier next to it, and of course that doesn't seem to work. He's like, okay, let me just have some time to myself. Let me, this woman doesn't even necessarily, he doesn't even necessarily ask. It's just like at about that exact time, the woman knocks on his door and comes in, and it says like, I locked myself out of apartments. You mind if I stay here? And so and she kind of seduces him into, you know, making out with him in like a pool of milk, I guess. That happens to be in the same room. They just ignore, like, the symbolism of where things pop in and out throughout the film is very, disjointed. However, it does seem to have like a bit of a flow of consciousness like element to the narrative. Uh, and then from there, it seems to cut to what seems like a complete non sequitur of a woman with big puffy cheeks, like singing on a stage. Uh, I think she's supposed to represent peace, and like because she says in heaven everything's fine, and the man shows up in the room with the woman, and she disappears. And it's about this time that the imagery kind of starts showing that the man uh, like is kind of also representative of the baby. It's kind of going along with the theme of like, okay, what I understand from it is if he just kind of kills this helpless thing that's suffering, God knows, like, the suffering that this baby's going through, like, he's probably much worse than he is going through trying to take care of this baby. Then if his solution is just to end its suffering, then who's to stop, like, some other larger power from just doing the exact same thing to him? It'd basically be the exact same thing in his case. It's And so eventually the like his head pops off, and in its place is the baby's head in his place. I think that's what that's meant to symbolize, that like he is kind of like this baby, like, damned to suffer, right? And kind of hoping that someone put it out of his misery, but also being afraid of, like, dying, as anybody would. Is like, would death even be better than this? And then when you're in a situation like this, it's almost like maybe, yeah, fucking maybe, you know. In the end, though, even the temptation leaves him. It's like he couldn't quite stay with it. Like there's some kind of, I think that's meant to symbolize. And then there's like, this old bald guy that ends up going with like the hot lady. And I think it's kind of to say that like, oh, only those who are truly depraved can really end up, living in sin. And so it's like, well, I don't get either. If I can't have that, and like, I can't have heaven, then like, am I really stuck here with this thing? And so he cuts open the wrappings, and it finds out that, oh, the wrappings are the only thing keeping this thing alive. It doesn't even have like skin or anything. It's just open lungs and intestines. And once you cut open those wrappings, like he did, just out of curiosity, it's like, oh, it's kind of screwed anyway. So almost purely out of mercy, knowing that like, what he did can't really be undone, he just stabs it, and everything in its guts kind of bleeds out, and the thing finally dies. But then in that last scene of the movie, he's hugging this puffy cheeks heaven lady, and I think that's him representing, finally being at peace in a way. And it kind of reminds me of someone's summary of the film Frankenstein, and how Mary Shelley actually went through like a like he not necessarily a miscarriage, but having like a bad birth and having the child die almost immediately afterwards, and how that inspired the story, in that like it's kind of a horror of like having to deal with it, but also like wanting it to live, but also knowing that it's not gonna, but also wanting to keep it alive as much as possible, but also the struggle of having to keep it alive is like kind of destroying you at the same time. And ultimately, after all of that, when it does finally die, the thing you're afraid of is feeling like relief at the fact that like it's finally over, and that like that relief is a bit of a temptation in itself, but like that relief is gonna come when it's finally done. It's very, very poignant film. I feel like, you know, one scene I will also mention that was very funny is that like when the guy behind the desk is ringing the bell because at some point Eraserhead has his Eraserhead popped off, and a child comes and brings it to a desk, like the like he rings a bell like someone's there, and there's like, got it, Paul. Someone comes off from behind the desk and it's like, got it, Paul. It's like, okay, so that guy's name's Paul. And That was funny. That was the one time I actually laughed in the entire film. Very very good comedic timing there. Anyway, I know it's kind of a slapdash summary, but I feel like it kind of you know fits with watching that film anyway. So yeah, go watch Eraserhead. It's free on Tubi. Highly recommend. Uh, I want to give it a rating, but I feel like this is kind of like above ratings. I give it a question mark thumbs up out of 10.